Well, the Nintendo Switch 2 is here. We've got a new screen, new controls, new games, but also some old questions. Is this truly the next leap for Nintendo, or just a well-marketed refresh? So this week's sales numbers were released and sales were huge. Excitement has been off the charts, but critics and fans have been divided. So today we're going to be answering one question: was the Switch 2 launch actually a success? Nintendo officially launched the Switch 2 on June the 5th, 2025, with a price tag of $449.99. The premium bundle launched with Mario Kart World at about $500, and on day one, players had access to a reasonable launch lineup. Mario Kart World was the big exclusive, plus we had the Switch 2 Welcome Tour. Nintendo also launched with an upgraded version of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, running at 60 frames per second and in 4K, and third-party support was pretty strong too, with Cyberpunk 2077, Street Fighter 6 and also Fortnite, but also loads more third-party games as well. Okay, let's have a look at the sales data, and it has been a record month. So the Nintendo Switch 2 didn't just arrive, it dominated in its debut month, setting benchmarks across multiple markets. So for example, in North America, Nintendo sold a staggering 1.6 million units in June 2025, marking the biggest launch for any console in US history, and the figure even surpassed industry heavyweights like the PlayStation 4 and the original Nintendo Switch, cementing the Switch 2 as a commercial juggernaut right out of the gate. Across the Pacific, Japan also saw an equally big release. In the first 4 days, 947,931 Switch 2 units were sold, nearly 3 times the original of Switch launch tally, and that was 330,000, and that made the Switch 2 the fastest selling console in Japanese history, overtaking the iconic launches like the PlayStation 2, Game Boy Advance, and even the Nintendo DS. Demand was so high in the region that Nintendo Japan storefront recorded over 2.2 million pre-order requests, overwhelming local retail infrastructure and prompting official supply warnings. So looking at the sales numbers for the first month, it wasn't just a good launch, it was a record-breaking event. Whether judged by unit sales, hardware revenue, or market influence, the Nintendo Switch 2's debut wasn't merely successful, it was one of the most impactful console launches ever seen in the industry. Okay, next up, let's have a look at the revenue and the market impact. So the launch of the Switch 2 triggered a surge across the entire gaming industry, particularly in the US market. So in June 2025, total video game hardware revenue reached $978 million, the highest ever recorded in that month. That figure alone marked a massive comeback for hardware spending, surpassing the long-standing record set in June 2008, and that was during the Wii and the Xbox 360 era. So what makes this spike even more significant is it wasn't limited to just console units. Accessory and software sales surged alongside the hardware, thanks to very high attach rates. For example, 82% of Switch 2 buyers in the US also purchased Mario Kart World, and 32% of people opted for the new Pro Controller alongside the Nintendo Switch 2 console, indicating a pretty strong consumer engagement beyond the base device. So these attach rates reflect not only just interest in the console itself, but a confidence in Nintendo's ecosystem as a whole. The Switch 2's release also helped propel total US video game spending for June to a staggering $5.7 billion, which is up 22% year over year, and that is a clear indication the launch didn't just benefit Nintendo, it also lifted the entire games industry, creating a positive knock-on effect for publishers, retailers, and also the accessory makers as well. So it's rare for one product to influence so many revenue streams all at once, but the Switch 2's hybrid appeal and the broad demographic reach achieved exactly that. In a time when console fatigue and economic caution are becoming way more common, the Switch 2 acted like a market reset button, reigniting consumer enthusiasm and restoring momentum to a plateauing industry. It wasn't just a successful launch, it was a market-moving moment. Okay, those are some of the numbers, but next up let's have a look at the player and the critic response. So while the Nintendo Switch 2 launch broke sales records and drove massive market engagement, reactions from players and critics have been a little bit more nuanced, so on the surface, the reception's been largely positive. Many people have praised the build quality, so it definitely feels like a high quality product in your hand. It's got a faster and smoother UI, the improved performance across both first party and third party titles, very good. The 4K dock resolution, the introduction of the Joy-Con 2 with the magnetic attachments, and the return of HD Rumble in a more refined form were widely welcomed as nice, smart refinements of the original Switch 1. So gameplay experiences like Mario Kart World have impressed visually, offering open world mechanics, new online features, and a fresh take on a beloved franchise. And also players have been celebrating Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and also Breath of the Wild, the Switch 2 editions, running at 4K and 60 frames per second, and also the new Pro Controller that's got programmable back buttons, improved haptics, the built-in audio jack. You know, many people are saying this is one of the best controllers they've ever used. But despite that enthusiasm, there's also clear notes of caution and also some criticism too. So some fans and reviewers have questioned whether the Switch 2 represented a true generational leap or just simply an enhanced version of the Nintendo Switch 1. So we've got no flagship new 3D Mario or Metroid game at launch, and also a reliance on the enhanced ports and the iterative sequels. A segment of the audience felt that Nintendo had played it a little bit safe. So a common sentiment that you hear across the forums or social media is it feels more like a Switch Pro than a Switch 2, but I think arguably that sentiment has probably changed over the last week with the release of Donkey Kong Bonanza. I think we've got our big single player game now. We've got essentially the follow-up to Super Mario Odyssey. This one is the single player game that we've been waiting for the Switch 2, and it's an interesting decision from Nintendo as to why they didn't release this on launch day. It gave a little bit of time for Mario Kart World to breathe. Roughly 5 or 6 weeks after the launch of the console, Nintendo hit us with their big single player game, Donkey Kong Bonanza. Yeah, it's the new 3D platformer, and I think it is the killer app for the Switch 2, and a very good reason to get your wallet out and buy the new console. But going back to the criticisms, there were early concerns about the Joy-Con durability. Some users have expressed some skepticism about whether the improved design would actually eliminate the drift issues entirely. And on the software side, while third-party performance has been solid, not every game has hit 60 FPS consistently, raising doubts about how well the console would handle future high-end titles. Ultimately though, the response from critics and fans wasn't polarised, it was pretty thoughtful. Players have been recognising the Switch 2's strength and welcomed the upgrades, but many were still waiting for that system-defining experience, the kind of first-party masterpiece that turns a great launch into a legendary one. As I mentioned before, you could argue that Donkey Kong Bonanza was exactly that moment. Okay, so finally, let's have a look at the question that we posed at the start. Was this a successful launch for Nintendo? So, by almost every measurable metric, the Nintendo Switch 2 launch was a massive success. It sold 1.6 million units in the US in the first month, making it the fastest selling console in American history. In Japan, it moved nearly 950,000 units in just 4 days, tripling the original Switch's debut and setting a new national record in Japan. And globally, it moved 3.5 million units within its first week. So these aren't just good numbers, they are generational milestones. But success isn't only about raw numbers, it's also about sentiment and player experience too. So the response was pretty solid from players, but also there's some caution in there. The upgraded visuals, the refined controller, the smoother interface, all very well received. Yet some fans and critics have questioned whether the launch lacked a true wow moment, that groundbreaking exclusive, a revolutionary feature, or a bold reimagining of the platform. So many agree that Mario Kart World and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom in 4K are great, but they are not transformative. So, was the Switch 2 launch a success? Commercially, undeniably yes. Culturally, partially, but there's definitely room to grow there. Nintendo delivered a confident, well-executed launch that reaffirms its dominance in hybrid gaming, but the true test may come later on when the next wave of exclusives arrive, and we see whether the Switch 2 can define a generation and not just lead it in sales. Well, let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you thought about the Switch 2 launch. Let me know what games you got. Let me know what you think about the hardware and the software. Would love to hear what you think. But That is it for this video today, looking at whether the Switch 2 launch was a success or not. And as always, thank you so much for watching or for listening. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for even more Nintendo content here on Power Up Direct. Thanks again, and I'll see you real soon.